Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about managing the brain's negativity bias. My name is Josie Thomson. I'm a mindset, resilience and change expert. I'm also a multi-award winning coach and international speaker, an author and a 2 times cancer survivor. I've also completed master's studies in neuroscience, as many of you probably know, and today I'm going to share with you a really critical core component of those studies that I've done in neuroscience that underpins our understanding of how this thing in between our ears called the brain actually works, and how, if we're not paying attention and we're not aware of how it functions and what it does, it can actually be running our lives. And the thing I want to do today is put you in the driver's seat of your life to show you how to put both hands on the steering wheel when your brain tends to want to go off-road a little bit, and to know how to manage its bias towards negativity and threat, lookout and safety. It's also going to be a webinar that gives you some practical ways of not only understanding all of that, but really about how to feel empowered and to know that no matter what's going on in your world, you do have choice. And that can be really comforting when a lot of the changes and the things that are happening around us, we understand at one level we can't control it all, but the thing that you're going to absolutely understand by the end of this webinar is the fact that you have total command as to how you respond to whatever's going on around you. So let's get started. The first thing to understand about the negativity bias of the brain is that it is perfectly normal, natural, human to have negative thoughts. In fact, the way the brain was, evolved over time was such that we had to be on the lookout. We had to be vigilant for potential threats to ourselves, our tribes, our communities. So if we heard something rustling in the bush, we had to basically be prepared for fight or flight. In these days, we find that the threats or the potential threats that we perceive are a lot more insidious. A lot of the things that seem to attack us or threaten us are actually invisible. You know, look at the internet and the things that come in through online, right, messages. And we're also battling our own mind. A lot of the thoughts that we have are negative, and a lot of the thoughts that we have can be quite self-defeating. Today I want to show you how you can re-script all of that. But the first thing I want you to understand at a fundamental level is having a negative thought is not wrong or bad. It's perfectly normal. It's what the brain was designed to do to keep you safe. However, you do not wish to live in that space, because the more you live in that space, the more you feed it and the more it becomes your entire reality. And I think you probably know what I'm talking about here. And then what happens, it just becomes this downward spiral that eventually will deplete you of all joy and sense of happiness in life. And it leads to what's called suppression and then ultimately depression. Okay, so we need to understand how this thing works so that we can take charge of it in a new way. So get ready for Neuroscience 101. Now, this is something I teach in most of my workshops. Some of you may have seen this before, but you cannot, I don't think I can reiterate this enough. When you really understand this, you really understand that you can do something about it and that you always have choice. So let's get started. I'm going to bring the screen down so you can see what I do here on this blank piece of paper. So let's see how I go doing this upside down. So I want you to imagine that this is a side view of your head. And whenever we're focusing on the brain, there's a couple of words that tend to come up, and that is the words focus and attention. And if you haven't really thought about it much before, you probably think these things are exactly the same thing, and they're actually not. They're actually very, very different. But let's continue. The number one goal of our brain is safety. Now, another word for that is survival, And another word for that is please minimize anything that I might perceive as a threat. So our brain's default position is to please minimize threat, keep me safe. All right, so when you wake up in the morning, it's absolutely normal, natural, human for your brain to be looking behind and going, have you sorted that out? Have you attended to those things? Have you responded to that? You know, it's always going off a bit of a tick list to make sure that you've attended to those things that are important to your perception of safety or survival in life. All right, so that's the first thing the brain does. Once those needs are met, bring back to this picture, then the brain will let you have the second priority, which is actually our first one. But the brain says, no, there's an order. You can't have happy, which are the things that are rewarding to you, until you have attended to my safety needs. So the thing to understand when it comes to your brain, an unsafe brain will not allow you to be happy. That's it. Okay? Happiness is not achievable if for some reason the brain's not feeling very happy, very safe. And that could be psychological safety, it could be mental, emotional, physical, right? And even spiritual. So if any of that's kind of like way too out of comfort zone, too much uncertainty, too much threat around, no direction, no lack of, no stability, then and security, then the brain's going to go, I can't be happy, actually. All right. So when you can understand that, it kind of makes sense. The brain wants you to be happy, but there are some conditions. And the conditions are, please let me feel safe. All right. And if I feel safe, knock yourself out. You can be as happy as you like. Now, there's two ways that you can motivate behavior. You can either motivate behavior through minimizing threat, or you can motivate behavior from maximizing reward. How do you do this and how do you know? Well, let me show you. So the second, I think or say these words, I don't want. My question to you is, what am I focusing my attention on? Right? What am I focusing my attention on when I say or think I don't want something? Right? And if this is the only tip you get out of today, I'm really, really happy. When I focus my attention on what I don't want, I feed it, I create it, I manifest it, I amplify it. Okay, so coming back here, when I focus my attention on what I don't want, I'm already there. All right, it's like saying, I'm going to speak in front of this group today and I don't want to be nervous, I don't want to be nervous, I don't want to be nervous. Well, guess what? You already are. Just by focusing attention on it, you have created that condition. So my question is, if that is how you get what you don't want, how do you get what you do want? It's actually really simple. You need to refocus your attention forward on what you want. So notice every time you focus on what you want, what direction do you travel? You're always traveling forward towards what you want. When you say you don't want something, you're trying to push it away. You're saying, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that. It's kind of like you're looking to the side or looking back. But when you say you want something, you are always focusing forward. And that's the key. Because not only does the brain have these two gears, number one, safety, number two, happy, there are some corresponding brain regions that you need to know about that operate with this program. The first one is the thinking capital of the brain, which sits just behind your forehead. And that part of the brain just there is called the prefrontal cortex. It's also known as working memory. It's also known as executive brain. Now, that part of the brain actually looks after all of our anything to do with processing information, okay, active processes of information. So that thinking capital of the brain there, it does things like decision making, problem solving, recalling information, learning new information, putting the brakes on information, okay? All the active stuff that we do with information is done by this part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. Now, there is this other part of the brain right in the middle, the big elephant in the room, all right? The emotional brain. Now, that emotional brain is called the limbic system. And the limbic system is very intricately wired with our habit center. It's also very intricately associated with all of our senses. So naturally, all the information that comes in from the senses, firstly, lands here, and then eventually makes its way to rational brain. But initially, it goes to this part of the brain. Now, this part of the brain, the limbic system, is reactive. It's primal. We're born with it. Even from day one, when we're born, we have a way of communicating our needs for survival, right? We're hungry, we're cold, we just yell and scream. Hopefully, we have more adaptive ways of having those needs met today, right? But we're born and wired for survival and safety, okay? It's just in there. This part of the brain grows stronger as we get older, right? But this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that capacity to work rationally with consequence and understanding, that part of the brain isn't fully developed until we're in our mid to late 20s, right? This is why teens do a lot of stupid things, because they're not really thinking about longer term consequence. They're only really thinking about immediacy of reward, right? And so let's talk about this a little bit more. So when you're focusing forward on what you want, this part of the brain, the limbic system, is responsible for producing certain chemicals in the brain that affects the quality of our thinking, right? So when you're focusing on what you want, the limbic system produces a chemical which does that. Now, that chemical there is called dopamine. Doesn't make you dopey. It actually helps you think better. It actually helps you make wise decisions. It actually helps you problem solve. It actually helps you learn information, be open to insight and creativity and innovation. It actually helps you to remember things that you know. And it even helps you to put the brakes on impulses and compulsions to react. All right? Now, you can get dopamine in lots of different ways. You can get dopamine from being around people you like. You can get dopamine from having a good belly laugh. You can get dopamine from exercise. It's really, really good. Now, as we know, not every day goes to plan, right? And so there will be occasions where your focus and attention will be diverted over here, okay? Normal. When that happens, the limbic system does something different. So what happens is a different chemical gets produced that does this. Okay. It results in what's called the downward spiral. And that chemical there, you've probably heard of it before. It's called cortisol. And essentially, that is the stress chemical. Okay. So what you'll notice is that the first part of the brain that it goes and floods when it gets triggered for safety or threat is your prefrontal cortex. So what that means is that that part of the brain, once you go into that fight, flight, survival mode, this part of the brain switches off. You can't have both parts of the brain switched on at the same time. It's either that or it's that. It's flip or that way, right? So you're either going to be using the executive brain or you're going to be using or predominantly driven by the reactiveness of our limbic system. So when you get triggered for fight, flight, oh my God, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to stuff this up, right? All of a sudden, your capacity to think straight goes out the door. Now, it's not because there's a problem with you. It's because your brain now has gone into fight, flight, freeze, please, appease, F off mode, right? It's got no deal. I'm not feeling safe. And because it's not feeling safe, you're actually not able to think straight. you're not going to make good decisions. You're not going to be able to problem solve very effectively. You'll probably forget things that you know, like you'll force your brain to try to remember something that you know, and you can't quite grasp that memory. And you're certainly not going to take on new information. And your capacity to emotionally regulate, right, will be low because your reactive brain is taken over. So look at the rest of this. So that cortisol floods your capacity to think straight, and then it actually goes and floods the rest of your brain, goes down into your spinal column, and then out into your nervous system, all right? So when that happens, the whole body now is on high alert. So what happens now is your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, your breathing changes. Instead of breathing down into your abdomen, you're now going to be doing a lot more of this shallow breathing, and you're probably going to be sweating a lot more than usual. Now, what that is, it's the limbic hijack, okay? And that's just the body's response to a threat reaction, okay? And so then when it goes and floods the rest of the body, it starts to affect the rest of the body. And if this condition of, threat is at a low grade, extended pattern, so you've been in this low grade chronic stress space for an extended time, what eventually happens is that cortisol wipes out another really important chemical that we produce in our small intestine called serotonin. And so serotonin is the happy pill. Serotonin is, what's in antidepressants. Serotonin is that chemical that has us feel a sense of equilibrium about life, and cortisol just wipes it out. And so it's not unusual that when that's happening, we can get into spaces of depression, right? And it's very difficult to experience joy and appreciation of life when you're feeling so low and down about life and about yourself and about what's going on around you. And that's just a typical consequence of the chemistry in the body. So again, I need to stress that it's not because there's a problem with you. It's just that your perception of circumstances at this time is creating a condition that's having you operate from this side. And when that happens, it has deleterious effect to our mental and emotional and physical well-being. It's normal for that to happen. Everything's connected. But the thing I want you to realize is it starts with a thought. It starts with perception. So let me say more here, and that's why I wrote these words down to start with, these words of focus and attention. Now, when you focus your attention on what you don't want, we know that we're amplifying it, right? But when we refocus attention forward towards what we actually want, all of a sudden we have resources available to us that are not available when we're operating in limbic land, all right? So that refocus activity can actually help you be able to make adaptive choices, will actually assist you to be able to realize that you have choice in whatever's going on around you. So like I said at the beginning, you can't control what's happening around you or even to you from time to time, but you have absolute command over how you choose to respond. But most of the times we're not aware of what's going on. We're not paying attention to what we're paying attention to. We're not thinking about what we're thinking about, right? So we need to be aware, right? We need to be much more aware of what's going on. So if you notice your heart rate starting to change, right? Your breathing starting to change, your body starting to contract, just take a moment and tune in and ask yourself, what am I thinking about right now? What is the story I am telling myself about what's going on right now? Write that down. What is my narrative? What is the story I am telling myself about what's going on right now? Now, you'll see that you would have received, that there is a download to a worksheet, which you've got some of these tips in it for you. There's also capacity for you to copy down what I've just shown you on that piece of paper about how the brain operates. There's a lot more to it, but really today what I wanted to do was give you the fundamentals of Neuroscience 101. And it really is about this fact that the brain is wired for that. We want this. The brain says, no deal unless you give me this. So as a consequence of that, when the brain starts focusing attention on please keep me safe, you're naturally going to be thinking this way. I don't want, I don't want, I don't want, I don't want. And just that focus of attention on that feeds it. It amplifies it. So what we need to do is pause, press the pause button, and refocus attention forward towards what you actually want. What do you want? So every time you have a negative thought, every time you have one of these I don't want thoughts, it's say, thank you, brain, for reminding me yet again about what I don't want. What is it that I do want? It's that simple. Now, yes, it sounds simple, and you know what? It actually really is. But it's not easy because you're going against the grain, right? If I said to you right now to make a list of all the things that you don't want in your life or you don't want to have happen in your life, you could write it like that. But if I asked you to write a list of the things that you actually do want, you would have to literally shift gears. It's a lot harder because you have to think, right? And thinking takes effort and energy. Reacting doesn't take much at all. You're just following a signal that's innate, right? It's there. It's already wired in. Go and do that. And you do. You're not thinking about it. You're just reacting with it, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to have these negative thoughts that come in from time to time. You need to be able to observe them. Just press pause. And one of the tips I want to give you is not only the fact of refocusing attention from what I don't want to what I do want. The other thing I want you to think about, so I've given you that. The other thing I asked you to start paying attention to is what is the story or what is the narrative that you're telling yourself, right? Because just by looking at that, you can go, that's silly. You know, why am I even thinking that? Right? But the third thing that you can do is you can actually attend to that narrative with your adult self, right? It's almost like learning to reparent that inner child that just reacts when they think that there's a problem or a threat going on, right? So it's about being able to attend to that little voice that goes, I'm scared, I'm not feeling safe, this doesn't feel good, with a voice of wisdom and reassurance and maturity that's able to say, hey, I hear you. Let's check this out a little bit and let's apply the wisdom and the strength that I have today to work our way through this. So you take your gentle little heart, right? And you say, so what is it that I do want? So the first thing you do is you just acknowledge the thought that comes in that's negative. You say, righto, so what are you thinking? Oh, okay, you don't want that. All right, so thank you for reminding me about that. What is it that you do want? Well, I want to do a good job, right? I want my manager to approve of my work. I don't want to be criticised. You don't want to be criticised. Well, what do you want? Well, I want to be acknowledged and recognised for my good contributions. Okay, then. So what's stopping you? Seriously, there's only one voice in your head and it's actually yours. Why would you choose to just defeat yourself with all these negative thoughts all the time? Well, actually, some of those thoughts have been there a very long time. And some of those thoughts have had command over you because you haven't been paying full attention to whose hands are on the wheel. Today, I want you to realize that just because your brain starts going off-road, you can get one hand and then the second hand on that wheel and redirect it. Redirect your focus and attention towards what you actually want and then use the powers of your prefrontal cortex and your executive brain to make wiser adaptive decisions in alignment with your true goals and your true self. That initial fright that you get from time to time, it's normal, right? But some of the narrative belongs to a much earlier version of you. So what you need to do is attend to that narrative with a kindness and a genuine understanding of wanting to assist and support it forward in an empowered way. So you don't want to go in and criticize yourself and beat yourself up and tell yourself how silly you are for having these thoughts. Well, actually, you're human. Well, last time I checked, you were. So because of that fact, you have a human brain, and the human brain is going to react, and it's going to have these frightful moments. So when those moments come in, you need to attend with a voice of reason and wisdom, right? To be able to say, hey, let me hear you, let me understand you, and let me help you to move forward here, right? Now, sometimes it's difficult to do by yourself because the fear mode can kick in. And when the fear mode kicks in, it can actually paralyze you. And it's difficult to pull out of that, but it's not impossible, okay? And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes, right? And I know what I'm talking about here. I've been through a couple of cancer scares and some other pretty major challenges where, you just got to become really aware of what the inner narrative is, because the story you tell yourself becomes the book that you start living. And if it's not the story you really want to be living, well, write a new one, right? Press pause on the old program and start focusing on what you do want. And just by doing that, all of a sudden this glimmer of hope starts to appear, and you go, actually, I have got choice. I could do this differently. Let's try it. And then just try something small. Any progress is progress, right? Take a small step. And when you take that small step and it's successful, you need to acknowledge and recognize that and give yourself a pat on the back and give yourself some positive reinforcement. Because when you give yourself that recognition and acknowledgement, it's actually received by your brain as a reward. It's like, yay, I did it, right? And it's also a signal to your brain to keep doing more of that because it feels good. And eventually you're just going to start doing that a lot more often. So when these negative thoughts come in, you'll just go, yeah, I know that story, but I'm choosing this now. I don't do that anymore. I'm doing this now. All right? So practice is the key. So the 3 ingredients for transforming habit is actually to, first of all, refocus attention on what you want. Second of all, it's repetition. Third of all, it's absolute persistence, right? And the fourth thing is positive reinforcement. So take note of when you get things right and give yourself a little high five or pat on the back, and let your brain feel that sense of reward and the sense of, hey, I did that. If I did it this time, maybe I can do it next time, or maybe I can do it the time after that, and even if I didn't get it quite so right this time, I'll try again tomorrow. Okay, you can do it if you want to. That's the key. So when people say to me, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, I've always been like that. I say, well, actually, that's not true. And neuroscience tells us that. There's this thing called neuroplasticity, which is the way we reprogram the brain. So the second you have an insight, you do something new, you've learned something, you can't unlearn that. You can't unsee that. And that's what neuroplasticity is all about, right? But you've got to have a willing and open brain to be able to do that. So today's webinar was all about how to manage the brain's negativity bias. I hope that what I've been able to share with you today has been useful to you. I would love to hear your feedback. Please share your feedback with me. What did you get out of it? What tip in particular really resonates for you? What are you going to try? Let me know. I'd really love to know. So please share your thoughts with me. Share the video with those people you care about who could really use this understanding about the brain. And if you want more about this, go and check out my website, josiethomson.com. There's events online and also in person. I've got my last public workshop coming up, all about fear and resilience, which is also a topic I absolutely love to talk about. So be there if you want to know more about that. Otherwise, in the interim, let me say these few words to you, that it's not what happens to you that defines you. It's how you respond that counts. Shine on, my friends. Bye for now.